fellas, since tomorrow night we have a stacked card in Abu Dhabi headlined by Umar Nurmagomedov. I thought I'd do a little bit of a recap on Dagestani fighters that are currently in the UFC and Dagestani fighters that have retired from MMA, and do a tier list on Dagestani fighters. So this is going to be a tier list comparing Dagestani fighters to other Dagestani fighters. It's not just going to be a tier list in fighters in general. And obviously, like I said, I'm going to be including current Dagestani fighters that are currently competing and ones that have retired or just maybe don't compete anymore. So this is my tier list on Dagestani fighters in the UFC, and we will start with the guy who's going to be main eventing this Saturday, and it is Umar Nurmagomedov. Now, for Nurmagomedov, I'm going to put him in B tier. I think B tier is the perfect place to put him so far. Now, obviously, this video has been recorded before his fight with Corey Sandhagen, so if he was to beat Corey Sandhagen, I'd put him in A tier, because for me, S tier is like champion, GOAT level, A tier is serious contender, and then B tier is, they've got a lot of potential, but they haven't really proven themselves yet. And I think Umar Nurmagomedov fits into that B tier because he's undefeated. He's made easy work of everybody that he's gone against so far, but he hasn't beaten Sandhagen yet. If he does beat Corey Sandhagen, 100% put him in that A tier because he's beaten one of the best contenders in the bantamweight division. But he hasn't done that at the time of recording this, and for all I know, he might get his ass whooped by Corey Sandhagen. So Umar Nurmagomedov, as of right now, I'm going to put him in B tier. I mean, in his last fight, he fought a debut in the UFC in Begzat, and he got dropped in the first round. He did dominate in the entire fight, but he did get dropped in the first round. He's got really, really good wrestling as Umar Nurmagomedov. His offensive wrestling and his ability to mix up the striking and fake the takedowns is so good. He's got really good, control time as well. So Umar Nurmagomedov, I'm going to put him in B tier. He's relatively unproven as of right now, but we're going to find out at UFC Abu Dhabi, does he deserve that B tier spot? Should he be higher? But yeah, for Umar Nurmagomedov, right now, relatively unproven, still has to go out there and beat Sandhagen, so I'm going to put him in B tier as a lot of potential, very, very skilled, but he's relatively unproven. Then we've got Said Nurmagomedov. I'm going to put Said Nurmagomedov in C tier. He's had the opportunity to prove himself, and he is in the same division as obviously Umar Nurmagomedov, but he hasn't been able to pass the test just yet. He had the fight with Jonathan Martinez in which he lost, and he hasn't beaten any high-level opponents yet. His last win was against Gafurov, who I believe, Gafurov's not the greatest talent in the UFC. I mean, he got a win in his last fight, but that's not saying much. I think Said Nurmagomedov might have a chance to break the rankings eventually, but I just think he needs to be more skilled because he's in the most competitive division in the UFC. He's lost 3 times as well. Like I said, he's lost to Jonathan Martinez. He lost to Barcelos a few years ago as well, and he just needs to get a good, get some momentum going, get a good win streak going. He's got kind of mid-striking, I'm going to be honest. I mean, he's got good not good Thai boxing, good Taekwondo, but apart from that, there's nothing really else to follow it up, and he's got a really good Darce choke, but I just think he needs to be a bit more offensive. I think he needs to get some good wins racked up. So for, Said Nurmagomedov, I'll put him in C tier. He's not ranked worthy. From what we've seen, he's not ranked potential, and again, he's in the bantamweight division, which is the most competitive in the UFC, but he needs to get some wins. He needs to get some good high-level wins, because of right now, I can't really say that I think he has, massive potential in the future of the bantamweight division, considering how he's competed against his toughest test in Jonathan Martinez. So for Said Nurmagomedov, I'm going to put him in C tier. Then we've got Magomed Ankalaev. Ankalaev is A tier. Now, we talk about Nurmagomedov, how he's relatively unproven. I'm going to put Ankalaev in A tier. Ankalaev's had a really good UFC career so far. His only loss is to Paul Craig, and Paul Craig pulls off the most fluky wins in history. I still don't understand how Paul Craig can beat Ankalaev and Jamal Hill and Nikita Krylov and then lose to unranked guys as well. He's kind of crazy, but no. Magomed Ankalaev's going in A tier. He's a really dangerous threat. I would say in the light heavyweight division, he's the biggest threat to Alex Pereira. Now, we did have the opportunity to fight for a belt, and he drew against Jan Blachowicz, but I do think he should have won against Jan Blachowicz. I would have given that to Magomed Ankalaev. Knocked out Johnny Walker, beat Anthony Smith, but I guess there was an injury in that as well. And he's just a really well-rounded dude, is Magomed Ankalaev. His striking has improved a lot. He's got really technical and dangerous striking, and he also has, the grappling in the back as well. I'd say he's more of a striker, if anything, but he also has the grappling in the back pocket, which is why it's going to be a difficult fight for Pereira. And he's going to be getting a title shot in his next fight, or at least he should. So, for Magomed Ankalaev, I'll put him in A tier. I think he should have beaten Jan Blachowicz and become the champion, but he didn't, so I'm going to put him in A tier. He is a top contender in the light heavyweight division, definitely the top 3 best in that division so far, so for that reason I've got no choice but to put him in A tier, and I think he has champion potential as well. Then we've got, technically this dude isn't in the UFC anymore, but it is Mokaev, the undefeated dude who was on a run and just got cut from the UFC. I mean, it was kind of funny seeing him get cut, but I kind of feel bad now. But I'm going to put Makhachev in A tier as well. Now, he's not on the same contender level as Magomed and Ankalaev. I don't think he's ever going to become a champion. I mean, he can't anyway. He's not even in the UFC. But even if he was in the UFC, I don't think he'd become a champion. I think there's a lot of difficult fights for him. I can see Steve Erceg beating him. I can see Pantoja making pretty comfortable work of him. Even somebody like Brandon Moreno, I can see being a really difficult fight for him. But he proved against Manel Kape, and he was undefeated as well as an amateur and a professional. And all of his wins in the UFC have aged really well. He's got a couple of wins against already ranked opponents, and the people that he's beaten that are unranked have gone on to go on a winning streak as well. So he's beaten some really good people in the flyweight division, and his resume was really good. But I just don't think he was good enough on the feet. I mean, every single time he got into a striking exchange with Alex Perez and Tim Elliott, he'd shoot for a panic takedown. His judo was really good. In that Manel Kape fight, we barely saw anything. We saw a few kicks from Mohamed Mokaev and then the takedown that he got. He tried pulling his pants down. So I don't think he'd have champion potential, but you got to realise as well, he's 23 years old. This dude had a bright future ahead of him that obviously he doesn't have anymore because he's been cut, but I'll put Mokaev in A tier. He was a contender. In my opinion, he was top 5 talent in the flyweight division, and I think he definitely could have fought for a belt. I think if he still been in the UFC, he might have been able to fight for a belt, so I would have put him, I'm going to put him in A tier. Definitely one of the best flyweights in the world, but I don't think I can put him in S tier because he's not the champion, and obviously I don't think he would be a champion. Next up on this list, we've got Khabib Nurmagomedov. I'm going to have to put him in S tier. No questions asked. Obviously, this is going to be a list of fighters that obviously aren't in the UFC anymore, but Khabib's going in S tier. He's the second greatest lightweight of all time. I'm still going to put Makhachev first, but Khabib's definitely second. What he's done for the sport and what he's just done for Dagestani fighters in general, I can imagine this dude has inspired so many different Dagestani fighters, and he's kind of like the godfather of Dagestani MMA. He was the first big one in the UFC. He's been involved in the biggest fight in UFC history when he beat Conor McGregor. He's got a really good resume with defenses. He's a former lightweight champion, defending against Conor McGregor, defending against Justin Gaethje, defending against Dustin Poirier. Some other good wins as well. Rafael dos Santos, Edson Barboza, Michael Johnson. So Khabib, he had a really good run in the lightweight division. I do think he could have got on for longer, and it would have been good to see him maybe, try and go up for the 170 belt, or maybe at least get a few more defenses in the lightweight division. So I do think he retired a little bit early, but to become a champion, defend a few times, and have a record of 29-0, I understand the majority of them were canned before the UFC, but even what he did in the UFC was amazing. So for Khabib, second, arguably the greatest lightweight of all time. I'm going to have to put him in S tier for that reason. Next fighter on this list, we have Shara Magomedov, the dude who's going to be competing this weekend. Shara Magomedov, I'm going to put him in C tier. I don't think he's got, similar to Sandhagen Magomedov, I can't see Shara Magomedov being a threat to a lot of these ranked opponents and being a threat to the belt or anything like that. He's undefeated. He's got probably the best striking, or some of the best striking on this list. He's a really good striker. His kickboxing is really good. But again, he hasn't proved it. He's 2 wins in the UFC, been against Bruno Silva and Tricoli. Tricoli was a can. I don't think he's fighting in the UFC anymore. And I think he would struggle a lot against a wrestler. I think the second you put this dude against a wrestler, because you got to remember, he was getting held up against the cage by Tricoli. Bruno Silva had a lot of control time against him, and those guys ain't grapplers. You put him against like a high-level grappler, I don't think that ends well for Shara Magomedov. Again, I'm not saying he can't improve his grappling. I'm not saying he can't get better, because for all we know, he could go on and, get into the rankings and improve his grappling. But for right now, I'll put him in C tier, relatively unproven. I don't think he's ranked potential from what we've seen. And again, I need to see how he does against Mokaev this weekend, but he's a really good striker. He belongs in the UFC. He's undefeated, so I'll put him in C tier. D tier is like lower level Dagestani talent, and he's just not that. He's a different type of fighter. He's a striker compared to the rest of the guys on this list, but I'll put him in C tier. Then we've got Muslim Salikhov. I think he's like 40 years old now, yeah. Compared to everyone else on this list, he's got to go in D tier now. He's a really good, I think he's a karate background that he has, karate taekwondo. He's a pretty good striker. He got a good win in his last fight, which I didn't expect him to do, especially at his age against Ponzinibbio, which was a really good win. He's had 5 losses in his career. He's just not good enough to make it to the top. I mean, as far as potential goes, he's literally on the last leg of his career, so he doesn't really have any potential. The few decent fighters that he has fought, he's lost to, obviously got finished by Randy Brown. He's fought a lot of the other top unranked guys and lost to them as well. He's a good unranked striker. That's as far as I'm going to go. He's a good unranked striker. He's already lost to the few guys that he's fought at the top, but he doesn't have the potential of a guy like Shara Magomedov. He's not undefeated. Muslim Salikhov, good striker. Got a good win in his last fight, but I'm going to have to put him in D tier for now. Then we have Ikram Aliskerov. Ikram is a bit of a weird one. I'm going to put Ikram in, I'm going to put Ikram in C tier too. Now, I would say out of everybody on C tier, Ikram Aliskerov has the most potential, and I really want to put him on B tier with Umar Nurmagomedov, because you've got to remember as well, Umar Nurmagomedov hasn't beaten any ranked opponents. Again, this is filmed before the Sandhagen fight, so maybe he does beat Sandhagen. But Umar Nurmagomedov has not beat any ranked opponents either, so technically him and Ikram could be on the same level, but Ikram Aliskerov, he lost to Robert Whittaker, which is a massive step up in competition. There's no shame in that. He got KO'd by Chimaev in a promotion a few years ago, but he's really well-rounded. I see more potential in Ikram Aliskerov than I do in somebody like Shara Magomedov. He's got really good offensive wrestling. He showed this on the Contender Series, and he's good on the feet. He's not like a high-level striker. He's not one of the best strikers in the division as he showed against Whittaker, but he's really well-rounded. He seems to be dangerous, and I think he's got a lot of potential. If you give him somebody like Andre Muniz or just another unranked middleweight and allow him to climb himself up, I think he has really big potential for the middleweight division. But again, I can't put him on the same tier as Umar Nurmagomedov. He's fought against these top guys like Robert Whittaker and Chimaev, and he's been finished in both of those fights, and he hasn't really got any major good wins in the UFC. I mean, his other win apart from Robert Whittaker was Wally Alves. So Ikram Aliskerov, bright future, a lot of potential, but he's not proven anything yet, so I'm gonna have to put Ikram Aliskerov into B tier. Next up we've got is Zabit Magomedsharipov. I might have to put Zabit Magomedsharipov in C tier too. I'm going to put Zabit Magomedsharipov once again in C tier, but I'm going to put him on the lower level of C tier. He's lost to Sean Strickland, got finished by Sean Strickland, but he was a former champion, and at the time when he lost to Strickland, Strickland then went on to become the champion. He lost to Caio Borralho. He's a good striker. His gas tank has definitely improved, because at the beginning, he was just a decent kickboxer, and to be fair, he did win like the first round against Sean Strickland, but his gas tank was terrible. His offensive grappling wasn't as good as wasn't as good as expected, and he was just kind of like a sloppy technical striker. Well, not a sloppy technical striker, but a sloppy striker who was technical for the first round, and then after the first round got sloppy, and his gas tank was ruined. But he's managed to build himself back up. Like I said, his gas tank seems to be doing better. He seems to have sharpened up a little bit, so I'm gonna have to put him in C tier. Again, probably the bottom of C tier. I think Saeed, I think Shara, I think Ikram Aliskerov, all those guys have more potential than Zabit Magomedov, but he's not terrible. I don't think he's Muslim Salikhov level. I still think he has potential to build himself up, maybe get back in the rankings. But you got to remember, again, the guys that he's lost to is Caio Borralho, who's an undefeated prospect who's ranked, and Sean Strickland, who's a former champion. So I'm going to put Zabit Magomedov in C tier. He's talented, but I don't see any crazy potential in him. Then we've got another ex-UFC star. Well, not star, but ex-UFC fighter. And it is Zabit Magomedsharipov. I'm going to put him in A tier. He was a legit contender at the featherweight division at the time. He was undefeated in the UFC. He only had one loss in his MMA career. And this dude is one of the biggest what-ifs in the UFC, because how far could this guy have gone? He had some really good wins. He beat Calvin Kattar. He beat Jeremy Stephens. And he was just styling on everyone. His ability to just trip people up. He had the most unique takedowns, the most unique submissions as well. And then on the feet, he was like a wizard. He was just landing shots. His leg kicks were amazing. The only problem with him was, again, he kind of started to show weaknesses in those later rounds when he fought Calvin Kattar. His gas tank was definitely very questionable. After the third round, it became very evident that he had gas tank issues. But I think if he could have sorted out his gas tank issues, he was one of the most crafty dudes in the featherweight division. I'm pretty sure at one point he had a fight scheduled with Yair Rodriguez. That would have been an amazing fight, and I do think he would have beaten Yair Rodriguez because of his ability to, take people down and mix his striking up with his grappling. He was a big prospect, and well, not even a prospect, he was a contender as well. He was a contender in the featherweight division, and I was obviously got ill, decided to retire from MMA, which is a shame because I would have loved to see this dude's career play out. But Zabit, 18-1, really had a really bright future in MMA, became a top contender, and then the only thing that could beat this dude was illness. So for Zabit Magomedsharipov, I'm going to put him in A tier, probably the lower level of the A tier because he only beat a couple contenders, but again, sky was the limit for this dude. He could have gone on to have a really good career, so I'll put him in A tier for now. Next up we've got is Islam Makhachev. In my opinion, the greatest Dagestani fighter in the UFC. Maybe not the most popular because Khabib definitely takes that crown, but I think already he has got the best resume out of every Dagestani fighter. I mean, first of all, as the current lightweight champion, he beat Charles Oliveira, who is technically a stylistic nightmare, a guy with good stand-up and dangerous submission game. Made easy work of him, beat pound for pound Alexander Volkanovski twice, and he KO'd him in one of them. Beat Dustin Poirier, finished Dustin Poirier, couple other wins on there. Obviously finished Bobby Green in the first round, finished Dan Hooker in the first round, Drew Dober as well. he's already got a really good resume in the lightweight division. In my opinion, again, I don't just want to make everything between him and Khabib a competition, but for some reason, every MMA fan likes arguing over it. So my case is that Makhachev is better than Khabib, and I think he is the greatest Dagestani fighter of all time so far. I think he's the greatest lightweight of all time, and he doesn't seem to be losing anytime soon. Pound for pound #1. He's got probably some of the best wrestling in the UFC. His stand-up has improved massively in his recent fights, and I know he has the threat of the takedown, but landing shots on Dustin Poirier, dropped Charles Oliveira, knocked out Alexander Volkanovski, and people still want to disrespect this dude's striking. So for Makhachev, he's the best Dagestani fighter, and I'm going to put him in S tier. But that is my tier list for Dagestani fighters in the UFC. Again, maybe after tonight when we see Umar and Shara Magomedov perform, this ranking could change, but that's my tier list. Let me know your thoughts on this tier list. Thank you for watching.